Hello, magical people of the internet. I'm Jen, and welcome to my vlog, I Never Thought I Would, where we discuss doing things we never thought we would do and the fascinating places that they can lead us to. I have a wonderful guest today. She's a Canadian author based in Toronto, Genevieve Chornenki. Hi, Genevieve.
Hello from Toronto, Canada.
How are you today?
Excellent.
So, as an author, you have a fascinating imagination, as most creatives and most writers do. And I'm sure that's led you to do maybe one or two things in your life that you never thought you would do. Do you mind sharing one of those with us today?
Be happy to. I want to tell you, it's not because I had a great imagination that this came to pass. Okay. It's something that I didn't expect and that I was faced with a lot of fear when it first came up. So what I never thought I would do is I never thought I would go to India, period. And I certainly never thought I would go there as a non-medical person and have the opportunity to witness sight restoration surgery. So for that to make sense, I have to give you a little bit of a backstory, okay? So when I was 40, when my son was born, I started having these strange symptoms, visual symptoms. You know, like if I looked straight ahead, something would be clear. If I looked over here, it wouldn't. And then I saw wavy lines and I used to take my glasses off and I'd polish them, or I'd think there was something wrong with my contact lenses. I went to my optometrist and she said, "Oh, that's the aura of a migraine sufferer." I said, "Well, I don't get migraines, but okay." As it transpired, I actually had one of the few ophthalmic emergencies. So 3 surgical procedures, 2 of which were under general anesthetic later. Let's just say I had a renewed appreciation for the ordinary act of seeing. Not that I didn't appreciate seeing before. It's always been my favorite sense and my most treasured sense. But I just, ordinary things looked more than ordinary.
Can you tell us what the optical emergency was?
Yes. Okay, it was called a giant retinal tear, where the retina starts to peel away from the inside of your eye. And because there is no sensation attached to it, like you're not in pain. Mm-hmm. And because it's not localized, like I couldn't figure out where it was coming from. So it was in my left eye. When it was eventually diagnosed, the retina had detached what I think like more than a quarter of a clock, right? So wow. It's very serious, because if it detaches right in the center, in the fovea, which is your clearest vision, curtains. Yeah.
So how did you finally find out what was wrong, number one, and number two, were they able to figure out how it happened?
I don't think anybody knows how it happened. Like, it wasn't trauma or anything. Sometimes people have it if they playing football and get hit or something. Mm-hmm. It was actually quite by fluke that I was getting a renewed pair of contact lenses, and I put them in my eyes and I said, "Oh man, that's not making any difference." And the contact lens fitter said, "You can put anything you like in front of your eye, but if there's something wrong with the eye itself, it won't matter." I went, "Oh, that had never even occurred to me." And even still, it didn't occur to me. So it took a couple of weeks. He arranged an appointment for me with an ophthalmologist, and it took a couple of weeks for that to happen. Parenthetically, the day I was going to the ophthalmologist, I was working with a colleague who used to work in an eye clinic. And I told her I was going. She started doing these, "Can you see this? Can you see this? What about this?" And I'd say no. She goes, "I think you have a detached retina." It didn't mean anything to me, nothing. So when I show up at the ophthalmologist, I say to him, "I think I have a detached retina." And he says, "Don't be ridiculous."
It's so uncommon.
I don't know. I guess he thought I was, clipping his turf or something. I don't know. Oh. Right. And then as it turned out, a few minutes later, he said, "Oh, do you prefer St. Michael's or Sunnybrook?" So yeah, that's how it was. That part was a bit dramatic. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. Well, it's amazing that first of all, that your colleague was able to, kind of ask you some questions and have you look in certain places and figure it out. That was so lucky. So when you went to the ophthalmologist, you were able to kind of give him a lead as to maybe what was happening.
No, I didn't say that she'd done any tests or anything. I just said, I think this. So he looked and he could see, he looked inside. And oh, by the way, the symptoms are not that unusual. Like they are very well established symptoms. I just had no idea. I had no idea whatsoever. After that bit of drama and with a newborn baby at the same time,
oh my goodness.
I was working one day with a colleague who said to me, hey, Jen, you know, my parents donate to this charity that restores eyesight. And I said, well, that's really interesting. And she said, yeah, it's out of Calgary and they do it in the developing world and it's $25 an operation. And I said, how much? $25? Where do I sign? So I started being a donor. The charity is called Operation Eyesight Universal. I started being a donor. And every year when I did the seasonal greeting for my business, I would make sure that I made a donation for something called a surgical eye camp, which sounds like tents under trees, but it's not. They're actually proper medical facilities, but that's what they call it, because people from the geographic area who cannot afford eye care get brought and have surgery, principally cataract surgery, because there's huge worldwide blindness just due to cataracts. It's one of the simplest operations. Very well. Anyway. So I had been in the practice of sending money yearly for an eye camp. And then in my seasonal greeting, I would send out that this is what I had done. And my seasonal greeting always had at the top a quote from Dickens, which was, business, mankind was my business. And then I would explain, right? So, and after each donation, and they were incredibly small donations, I would get cards. And the cards would tell me the name of the person, where they lived, how old they were, whether it was a man or a woman. So I had stacks of these cards. And they were from places that I never even thought ever of visiting. India, Bangladesh, Nepal, because that's where the charity was at that present time. And by the way, what it did is it worked with credentialed partners in the countries. So it's not jetting people in, right? It's supporting local medical personnel. Then one day I get a letter in the mail from the charity. Would I like to buy a place in the women's tour that would go to India, limited to a certain number of Canadian female donors, and the principal purpose of which would be to observe the work done by female doctors in India in relation to eye care.
Oh, wow.
So I get this letter. Yeah, that was my reaction. Oh, wow, because here I was a huge Gandhi fan. But I go, India. So it's almost embarrassing to think of the images that I conjured up about India. It was this mélange of, Mother Teresa and Dominique Lapierre. And so what I had done for myself is I conjured up these images that there would be so much suffering that I couldn't ameliorate, that it would be intolerable, right? But I talked to my husband. He said, listen, this work's important to you. You should go. I said, okay. I said, yeah, but I'll be like, there was a 24-day itinerary. I said, yeah, but I'll be gone for a while. And he said, yeah, we'll miss you. That's okay. So I decided to go and I signed up. And I also specifically sent money saying, can you do an eye camp at a place where I will be? Because I really, really, really wanted to see this for myself. And I just want to pause here to say that there were two things that were really important to me. One was making a practical difference in the life of an identifiable human being. Okay, not some amorphous a person, because the implications of blindness are profound for family life, for work life, for education, etc. So that was important to me. And the other thing that was really important to me was to be able to draw a direct connection between what I did for a living, mediating, teaching, facilitating, whatever, getting paid for that work, and then could I join the dots directly to making a difference in somebody's life? That's what was really important to me. So that's why I really wanted the opportunity to see a quote surgical eye camp while I was there. And we were all over India. We were in Mumbai, we were in Jaipur, in the Nilgiri Hills, all over. And I'm waiting as we're getting to the place where my eye camp is going to be taking place. Of course, along the way, we were seeing absolutely amazing things. We visited the slums where this was my biggest fear, where one of the doctors had determined that if people were eating the right vegetables, there wouldn't be a vitamin A deficiency, and that would, okay, so we did that. And I might add, in the slum was, this is going to sound weird, it was a blast. People were so friendly. People were so joyful. And when we got out of there, the tour leader who'd actually worked in India and lived there, I think was even born there, she said, "Did you ever read City of Joy?" And I said, "Yeah, matter of fact, I did." She goes, "Wasn't that City of Joy?" And I said, "Yeah." I had not anticipated that joyfulness of life. I just hadn't, because I had all these other images, right? So we saw that. We saw a 35-year-old ophthalmologist who was first in her class, who used her own money to start an eye clinic.
That's incredible.
It's amazing.
It's amazing how you're talking about in the slums, how joyful people can be with so little, because they have no comparison. In the Western world, we have so much. Life is relatively easy for the majority of us. Even people who are in poverty, they generally have a roof over their head. They have food on the table. They have electricity. They probably have a TV and a smartphone. And it doesn't matter how little or how much we have in the West, we always want more. We're always striving for more. That's kind of like the meaning of our existence: consume, consume, consume.
Yes.
That's what our society is built on. And you can go to a different part of the world where people have so much less and they are so much happier.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. And to your point, I recently listened to a doctor named Dr. James Orbinski, who used to be the head of Doctors Without Borders. Mm-hmm. He's now concerned about vaccine distribution around the world globally. But he commented to the group, "You have to realize in Canada, you live at the pinnacle of the pinnacle of the pinnacle of medical care, not only worldwide, but in human existence," right? And I thought, yes, absolutely correct. So the other thing that was meaningful to me was, here I had an emergency. I showed up at the eye clinic. I was on the operating table the next morning. I didn't have to wait. I didn't, right? And so how is it that someone else doesn't have that? So that was also an important, a meaningful factor for me.
It's so interesting. I actually had eye surgery just before the pandemic, actually. Mm-hmm. The end of February of 2020, I was diagnosed with a rare thing called narrow angle that can turn into narrow angle glaucoma. And basically it's when the drain in your eye starts to get covered. And if it is completely covered, you can go spontaneously blind within a couple hours. So they did this laser surgery where they had to poke holes, poke a tiny little hole in each eye. Right. So when the drain is covered, there's a way for the pressure to release so the optical nerve doesn't suffocate. And I had never heard of it. Even like I went home, I said to my mom, I'm like, I have this thing, I got to do this surgery. I told my parents, my brother, because the doctor who diagnosed me said, well, this might be a genetic thing. You want to tell your family and have them get checked out. And it was so funny because we had never heard of it. My brother, he's quite cynical. He's like, is this a scam? Is this a real doctor?
You'll find out, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually went on YouTube and I found a video of an ophthalmologist explaining the disorder and explaining the surgery.
Right.
And sent it to my family so they knew it was a legitimate thing when it's something uncommon that you've never heard of.
But that's the thing. Seeing is so ordinary. We take it for granted. It works. And then when something goes wrong, we go, well, that never even occurred to me. But there's a whole range of these things out there. We just are oblivious to them.
Yeah. And actually my mom had the same thing. So she had to get the laser surgery as well. Who ever heard of spontaneous blindness? I've heard of hysterical blindness, but not spontaneous. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's fascinating. I wasn't having problems with my vision. So it was something I never would have detected.
Okay, so you didn't even have symptoms.
I had no symptoms, and I don't even go to the eye doctor regularly. It had been 5 years. I thought it was like 2 years since I had gotten a new prescription for my glasses that I am in denial that I need. And
We'll get to that when we get to my book. Okay.
yeah, exactly. And I went to fill my prescription at the same lens crafters that I had used earlier. And I was like, oh yeah, I was here like 2 years ago. And they're like, no, it's like almost been 6 years. It's been 5.5. And I was like, wow, where did the time go? But yes, now that you mentioned your book, let's talk about this fabulous book, Don't Lose Sight.
The simplest way I try to explain it is it's a cautionary tale and a contemplation on eyesight. So it's a cautionary tale for the reasons we've been talking about.
Yeah.
And it's a contemplation on eyesight because I talk more about sort of the pleasure that comes from eyes and that kind of thing. But it's divided into 3 parts. And the middle part is actually about me making a complaint to the regulator of the person who missed the problem and what happened in there too. So it's not like the book's not a diatribe or anything. It's sort of it talks about, you know, what happened and how the household managed with a nursing baby and a woman who had to stay on her side for 2 weeks and couldn't move and couldn't do anything, you know, so there's that. And then there's about what happened when I complained and how that fell a little shy of protecting the public interest. And then in the last part, I actually entertained the conceit that I could figure out how eyesight worked and explain it to people in ordinary English.
Oh, wow. And so it's a memoir of sorts.
Yes, it's a memoir. Yes, it's a memoir, but it's not a memoir in the sense of, and then I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this. Like my goals were much different than that. Yeah.
Yes. And actually, I would like to find out, did you in fact complain about the first doctor who told you you were having migraines? And how did that go? What did that transpire into?
Short version of the story is the optometrist pleaded guilty to professional misconduct because an expert report had indicated that the examination that was done was inadequate.
Okay.
And then the regulatory body, as a remedy, wanted to go in and look at paper files. And I said, wait a minute. How does looking at paper files remedy someone's inability to detect something in the field, right? Mm-hmm. And I got a lot of pushback, so that I had to actually get a lawyer and go to the hearing, and on it went. Yeah, it was.
They wanted to look at the files of what they were writing down.
Yes.
Okay, but what they were writing down doesn't necessarily say how they conducted their exam to find out what the issue was.
Yeah. So the explanation that was given to me eventually, because I went and had a face-to-face meeting with the registrar of the college, was, well, you know, there should be a certain percentage of people that have what you have, and we should be, and I'm going, wait a minute, I'm sorry, that still doesn't make any sense, right? This was a failure to detect something in a live human being, right? Mm-hmm. So I think my pushback was not appreciated because I was showing that I didn't know my place. That's how I would interpret it.
Well, good for you. You know, what place? What does that mean?
I know.
A medical professional failed to examine you properly, and you could have had dire results because of their negligence. So are they still practicing?
Not now. No. The person has since retired.
Okay, well, that's good.
Mm-hmm. But recently retired. Yeah.
Oh, recently retired, but they were still able to practice. I'm sure through the trial and the interim, they were still practicing.
That would be correct. Yeah. Yeah.
As a Canadian, you really don't hear of a lot of people suing for medical malpractice or, challenging the system, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like suing, suing and that kind of pushback in the medical field happens very frequently in the United States.
Right.
But Canada, we're too polite. Like we're too like, oh no, that's what the doctor said. Oh, they just made a mistake. Oh,
Right.
humans make mistakes,
Right.
and that doesn't serve us as a society.
Yeah. And I didn't start a civil lawsuit. I wasn't looking for money or anything for myself. My concern was, well, someone else could be at risk.
Exactly.
And previously in my job, I had at times done mediations where patients had complained about doctors. And so it's a very common thing for patients who complain to say, I don't want this to happen to somebody else. I mean, that's really common and that's entirely legitimate, right?
Yes, it is. I have to say kudos to you for going up against the system, because especially, you had to hire your own lawyer. You had to take money out of your own pocket. It cost you time. It cost you energy. You had a young child at home. You have your own career. I'm sure those hours, the dollars, hours took away from other things that you could have enjoyed doing. So that's really amazing, because a lot of people who want to push back against the system just resolve not to because it's too much effort.
Yeah, it's too much effort and you don't know how. And, I'm not sure that at the end of the day, I don't know what I achieved for the public interest. I just know that I felt compelled to do it, right?
Do you think your legal background gave you the courage to push back when kind of a layman individual might not have that?
No, but I do think that the fact that I had, working as a mediator, I wasn't representing anybody, but the fact that I had knowledge of the system,
that's what I mean,
was a factor. And I'll tell you how it was a factor. It was a factor because the lawyer who was representing the regulatory body was offended that I challenged his work. That's what got it going. Okay. Wow. That's the real story.
So how long after this experience did you write the book? Did you write the book before or after you went to India?
Oh, long after. Okay.
So you had
long after.
So you had gone to the camp and you had done the 24-day tour.
Yep.
What inspired you to write this book? Because you have publications in your field, but this is your first novel. So memoir. What brought this about?
I first started writing this way back, like probably 15 years ago or more, when I took a workshop on Hollyhock. Do you know where Hollyhock is on the BC coast? It's beautiful. Okay. Yes. From a Canadian author. And initially, just like you were saying about your eye condition, like who knew? It was sort of an impulse to say, hey, this happens. You might be interested to know that this happens. And people around in the workshop said, yeah, that's real. And then other things, a small boy to raise, work, et cetera, et cetera. But in the last several years, I decided that what I wanted to privilege for myself, now that my son's off my meal ticket, was working with words, which is what I've always liked to do. And so I initially went and got a certificate in book publishing, which had a gajillion editing courses. And I found I adored grammar and I love editing. And I had no thought really of writing anything for myself, but then I sort of went into and moved into taking writing courses. And I began to see in a way that I didn't appreciate how much of a craft it was. Because I come from a background in informational writing where it's logical, it's linear, you don't repeat a word, you use the same word to describe the same thing all the time. And as I was taking these writing courses, the light bulb started to go on. Oh, wait a minute. You can repeat things for effect? Wait a minute. You can play with words? Whoa, what a concept. So I started to understand more about writing as a craft. And as that developed, I wanted to do so much more than just tell a story or get even. There was some component of getting even initially, right? And what I wanted really to do was to give other people an experience so that they could read it and they could have whatever experience they wanted. But people have told me, oh, I cried when I read that. I think, cried? I never thought about that. Oh, I laughed. Oh, that's what I wanted to do. So fortunately, I now in a position where I can do whatever I like. And I decided that I was going to privilege and continue to privilege working with words. So
That's wonderful. That's so exciting. And it's amazing that you had the impulse to like take these writing workshops, because
yeah,
a lot of people have a desire to write, but they feel like they don't know where to start. And it doesn't really occur to them that you can take a class or a workshop or a certificate program at any stage of life. You don't have to be the age of a college student to go back to college or university to become proficient in something else. And I think that's amazing. That's an inspiration in itself, the fact that you did that. So now I'd like you to tell us all where we can find you and find your books. Give us all the important info.
okay. So you can find me on my website, GenevieveChornenki.com. I love email. People are welcome to email me, gac@chornenki.com. I'm on Instagram. It's the name flipped around, Chornenki Genevieve. The book is available all the online places. What I really encourage people to do, and people have done it in a number of places across Canada, is go into an indie bookstore and order it. So I've had
independent booksellers.
support indie bookstores. Somebody I knew bought a dozen copies and gave them out, and somebody who received one bought more and gave them out. And and I've received just lovely, lovely emails from readers. It's been really, really lovely.
That's amazing. Well, Genevieve, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. We will have all the links below to make it easy for all of you to find Genevieve, her website, social media, and of course, her fabulous book, Don't Lose Sight. Thank you all for tuning in today. And I'd like to challenge you to do something that you never thought you would do. Let us know what it is in the comments and where it leads you. Have a beautiful day, and don't forget to like and subscribe.